Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duval, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who should be looking closer to home for a more reliable woman.
Oh, man. Tim Longo.
Yep.
No, that is not what is happening.
It's the worst.
Moneypenny.
Every chapter. Chapter.
I could have
picked any one of them. No, it's really not. But it was just like the movies are that way with her, especially some of these later ones. Like they finally gave, what was it, Thandie Newton maybe? Is that who plays her?
No.
Who is it?
She was in Mission Impossible. She might have been. Yeah. No, anyway. But I mean, Moneypenny's kind of like a badass now. Right?
Yeah, they've evolved her. Yeah,
in the Daniel Craig stuff. So
yeah.
I mean, it's definitely the right direction, but ridiculous. Yeah. Well, and you, sir, you've got the sniffles, and so I applaud you for still doing the podcast this week. Everybody should be grateful for that sacrifice. I just want to mention it up top.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been a little under the weather. I'm traveling, and I'm not. I don't have the immune system for where I am. I'm getting exposed to, I guess, viruses that I haven't had. So it's I have somebody who works for me who also is, he's from South America, and he traveled home recently, or from where he was born, and he got very sick because he hadn't been there in a while because of the pandemic, and he went and got all the colds that he hadn't had, and then came back and got new ones because, of course, he's got a young son besides. So it's just Anyway, I
was going to make a joke how you are actually traveled to Florida, and that's where.
Yeah, good times. Yeah, right. Of course, because they went a different direction in managing the pandemic. Let's move on to the game we're playing. Of course, this week we were attempting to finish the single player of GoldenEye. One of us finished it, and I don't even feel bad about it because I was so leveraging the save feature. Like, we should just get right to that part. So there's a part, and this part is in the movie where they're on this train, this Russian missile train or some bullet train or something. They're on some kind of train, Bond, and he recovers this Natalia, and gets her. But then they get locked into basically a trap, and they're going to blow up the section of the train. And this is all in the game, more or less. Which is cool. It reflects it well, and she's also doing something at that time. Like she's using the fact that they've got a computer link up or something so that she can track back what this other programmer is doing. So it actually really closely mirrors what happens in the film, because when in the film, Bond is using his gadget on his wrist, his wristwatch laser, to cut his way out of the bottom of the train so that they can escape and not get killed when the thing blows up. And you are asked to do this it's sort of one of their mechanics is that sometimes they have things that are locked and you have to shoot the locks, right? Usually it's totally easy, because it's 1, or in the case of those missile silos, it's like 4 or something like that. And you can just shoot them. But no, here you have to use the laser watch. You can't switch back to a gun. If you run out of ammunition for the laser watch, sorry, it doesn't recharge. It has a limited number of charges, so you actually have to be pretty precise. And it's a shelf level event. Can you want to talk about your experience of that moment?
Well, it's so where to begin. I was able to use a gun. But I don't know if I used it first and then, what order it was in.
Okay.
So, because I was able to shoot the things off. I never finished it that way, but I don't know which one would be easier. But yeah, it's one of those situations we've talked about from time to time on the podcast where you have designed a thing that is fundamentally antithetical to how the game actually works.
Right.
Because for the most part, targeting things with a weapon or in this case, the watch is in your weapon cycle, right? So it's kind of a weapon. It has you're shooting something. But every place else in this game, except for I guess cameras, and then ironically in this level you have to shoot those brakes, which is like a whole nother funny thing. It's like, why am I shooting a brake on every car? Why don't I just shoot the brake on the last car?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't need to shoot all of them.
That's not how trains work.
Yeah, it's not how trains work. But anyway, but there's no lock on, right? So it's like I'm used to the interface, and also they put it on the floor, which I'm never looking at the floor.
Yeah.
Like, why would I? And so they do have some camera assist.
Because in the movie, it's on the floor.
Sure. Okay, fine. Well, yeah, just don't do this then. They did have some camera assist, which I applaud them for scripting that in at least, but it's unreliable and it doesn't even aim where you need it to. So it more is there, I feel like, just to show you that it's there. And then you have to do the rest. But yeah, I mean, I also had the whole, like, the other reason that I stopped was this getting stuck here, but just I was nauseated after playing one level. So I kind of had to really piecemeal it. And I was behind from last session, right? So I was even catching up to begin with. So there just was no way I was gonna without just, for health reasons, I don't know if I could have made it. But then you hit this one, and you're like, really? There's like how many of those 15 little brackets you have to hit?
I think it is. It's 5. It's actually 20, right? It's 5
20.
on the side or something.
Oh
like
my gosh! Yeah.
And it is absurd. It is one of those cases where it's like, it is again this sort of simulation question that we talked about last time versus like experience. And it's like, I want to experience what it's like to be Bond, but I don't want to do all the things Bond does to do that. I want to feel like the hero without having to do the things the hero does. Because of course in the movie, it's like, we only have a minute. It gives that pressure of like this time pressure in the movie that makes sense. And like, it's dramatic. And like, there's all kinds of good reasons to do that in a movie. Those reasons don't exist in games. Because and especially when you're introducing effectively a new mechanic, or using the watch. I wasn't able to use the gun, so it may be that if you start with the gun, you're okay, and like maybe that's an affordance. But if you start with the watch, it wasn't working for me anyway. I might have just been at that point so scattershot because, and here's the real. So I'll do. There's two more parts of this story. The real catch for me was, I finally got it done and had like 2 seconds left to spare. It's like, oh, thank goodness. And the thing falls away and drops out, and you like jump into the hole. And I thought for sure, cutscene, right? Perfect time for a cutscene. Nope. She also has to get to the hole and get out. So the timer they give you is it's not for you to do the thing.
Yeah.
It's for you to do the thing and for you to get out and for her to follow you. Yeah. So you're also relying on an AI at that point, to do the thing.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm, right? It's a perfect storm of everything that is
absolutely terrible.
So, double the time or don't put a timer. I don't know. It's like
something.
Yeah, it's too close.
Or just fewer things to shoot. I mean, like, I didn't mind replicating the film, but having these 20 hatches, things to do with of course, and we'll talk in a sort of nerdier way later about the controllers and all that.
Yeah, that's a big
definitely
factor.
Hugely comes into play here. But I leaned on, so a couple things. I came into, I did a whole bunch of times. I finally was successful, thought I'll be great. Oh, good. Hop down the hole. And then we all died anyway. I was like, oh no. And so I had like sub times, sub saves, of this experience in the Nintendo, in the Switch hardware. So I had like 3 separate saves just dealing with this one puzzle that all take place within a minute. So I'm like, okay, I finally got it to the point where it's like, okay, I have like 3 seconds left when I jumped down the hole, 4 seconds left. I was getting that much better at a time and it just wasn't enough. And so I had to go back to a save right before it started and actually start as soon as I like shot the guy that was holding her, start the puzzle immediately.
Yeah.
So that I could get a head start on it so that, and I think there was one other ruffian who was coming up behind me that I had missed or something. I don't know if he came out of the side compartment. So it was just like, because the idea of the whole section is pretty good. Like, you're fighting your way up a train. Cool. Mm-hmm. I've seen that in other games since, but I don't know if there was a game that did this before, and it feels like it. And you can of course imagine it really happening, sort of like, Uncharted style.
Mm-hmm.
Because Uncharted has great train sequences, and so you have this thing where it's like, okay, they're faking it, obviously. They're just playing sounds, they're rocking the screen a little bit, whatever, and making it feel like you're on a train, but you can't look out the windows and see the world passing by. So okay, great, totally reasonable for the time, but to get to that point and be like having to so tightly manage my time to have that, and to get out of it and be like, and then I had to kill some more guys, and I finally got her out, and I ended up killing her once, or actually she got killed because somebody shot me, but she was in the way, or he hit something that exploded, or I don't even know. Like, the frustration level of finishing that section, I cannot imagine playing that without save states.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine if you had to restart, play from the beginning, get to that point, and fail?
I'm sure we'll hear from somebody.
Oh, I know. I mean, the time to get to that failure. I mean, and again, maybe it was a little easier with the original controller, which is, maybe we should talk about that first, honestly.
Yeah, it relates. The last thing I was going to say, for me, like, when it comes to the pot, like, we might be overly critical about this, and there's, like, you could say putting it in its era, it's unfair to some degree, but because one of our goals of the podcast, in a way, is sort of takeaways, or like gems that are something that we might take with us, or maybe listeners might take with us. We do I think I can't think of other examples, but I'm confident that we have plenty of them over the history of the cast. That concept that I mentioned earlier of designing for your strengths, and making sure that that really think through what you do, what the game does well, and lean into that, versus trying to what games did in the old days. And this is a good example. And to be honest, games still do it, so I shouldn't even say the old days, but this concept of not tricking the player, but like trying to do a switcheroo. Like, we're going to do, it's like a recent example is the turret section in Dead Space, right? It's like,
sure, yeah,
we're going to mix it up. We're going to give you something super difficult, and it's something different than you've done. It's unlike anything you've ever done. It's going to be great. Yep. You're going to be running around. It's like, oh, I'm so tired of being this Isaac guy. And we're going to put him in a big turret and it's, shoot asteroids. But it's like, no, it's not your strength. It's like, don't, like, and ironically, in Dead Space's case, the rest of the game was really good, so that they had good strengths to lean into. Obviously, infamous kind of silly example, but here it's similar for me. It's like, get the idea, match the movies. There's an additional, like, licensed movie layer to this, right? Because they were trying to actually capture that moment of urgency in the film, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But you gotta, like, redesign, right? It's like, you gotta see, okay, what are we good at? Let's redesign toward that. Can we do a version that's still like the movie, but like reminiscent of it and not literal or something? So anyway,
well, I mean, at least it wasn't as literal as the movie, in which he's like got to cut a line all the way around it. Like, what was that game? I guess it was the new Wolfenstein. Like, he had a cutter on his wrist, and you could cut through certain types of fences and stuff like that, and you literally had to cut all the way around, right? And and it worked fine in that because you had the controls to do it, and it may have even helped you. I don't remember if it kind of aided you in doing that. So I'm glad they didn't go that far. Although at that point it would have been like, just like, make me trace a line, like Okami would do, or something like that. A little bit later. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
but again, it's as a segue to our next topic. It really is about, like, what is your interface? What are you using? And again, we didn't play it with the original controller, so maybe there's a difference there. But do you want me to start?
Yeah. Let's go to that, because I think it certainly applies here. And when I was doing it, and it was like giving me the camera assist, and that wasn't really helping, and like any little movement I made me go wildly off, I was like really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Dive into it.
Well, I mean, it's a It's a product of the way that we do the podcast, and anyone playing these games, or really the core focus of the podcast, playing retro games and looking at their impact and relevance today. Most of the time, I would say, we play in the non-intended way, whether it be platform, controller, hardware, speed, like all sorts of versions, right? And we had a very unique version of this, with the last one with Dwarf Fortress, because we could play all the different versions, etc. But even that was like we were playing on a modern processor, right? So it's like not even a true version, or not even a true experience, if you want to be really pure about it. So for me, this topic came up because I was trying to dissect why I was getting sick. And I was thinking through all the usual usability reasons that happens, because I'm actually, ironically, even though I worked on Halo, I get notoriously sick in FPSs if I'm watching somebody play and I'm not playing. And Halo was one of the worst ones for me. So everyone always would joke at that when I was working on the game. It's like, but there's ways to combat that, right? Whether it be FOV or crosshairs or frame rate, or there's lots of things. So I was trying to dissect that, but what it dawned on me during that dissection of like, okay, how can I fix this for myself so I don't get sick, I can finish the game? But what it dawned on me, and it's actually a frustration I have that I won't go on this tirade right now, but the Switch analog sticks, I think, are not great to potentially terrible. We've talked about this probably with Mario 64 for sure, probably with Ocarina of Time for sure. I say probably, and then for sure I know those are different things. But anyway, Nintendo was always good at designing for their interface and their controller, right? And this game was played on a completely different controller from the Switch, like night and day. And this is totally nerding out, but when it comes to controller construction, tuning, and then mechanical and hardware tuning and tension in the sticks, as well as tuning in the game on the software side, right? It's like GoldenEye, for most people who played it back in the day and have that nostalgia, probably, they were playing arguably the best version, right? Because everything was designed for that. And we're not playing that. And if you think about just something as simple as the analog stick, in my opinion, this isn't a scientific opinion, but in my opinion, the analog stick in all of our industry that has the longest throw, the farthest throw, and the most flexibility, and feels the most different from almost any other, is the N64. And this game was tuned for that. And then we're playing on probably the complete opposites of that controller with these stick analogs. And so part of my sickness was definitely coming from constant overcorrection, where the dead zone and the throw you have in the Switch is so small that I'm just like whipping left and right all the time, regardless of lock-on targeting. And I just make myself sick, and I don't think that would have been the case on the N64. And then you have to use a laser to cut 20 brackets. Like, forget about it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I have the same thing too. Just actually one of the biggest problems I had in this section was with that camera thing, was that I would try to back up a little bit, because I'm still very, fidgety with the controls. I'm having, all through the game, was still having trouble, even in the last levels, like being
can't do fine tune.
Can't fine tune anything, but also just can't remember what to do with which stick, like, because it makes no sense to my modern gamer brain to do it this way, right? And of course, it wasn't this way in the original game either, right? They didn't have two sticks, so the way that the Nintendo has mapped the controls on the Switch are also just weird.
You could have two sticks, but you needed two controllers.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But, for people who, the way it was designed, I think
most people know,
with one in mind. And that just drove me batty, because I'd try to move closer. I try to back up a little bit because I had overshot it when I needed to tilt. But then, like, if you're not holding the tilt or something, I don't know, like, it starts auto correcting again, so it will like pull up. It was maddening.
It auto levels,
maddening. Yeah, it auto levels all the time. And so I just was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And it was literally just like 15 seconds in being like, oh yeah, that was pretty good, I should save it. And then occasionally being like, yeah, no, that 15 seconds wasn't quite good enough. I need to start from the beginning again and have a better midpoint, it was just awful. It was just awful. But I did it for you, the listeners.
Well, you can. I mean, obviously they could have, like you said in the previous episode, this is an emulation. So most likely there was this is like au naturel or whatever.
Yeah. But they could have tweaked. They could have tweaked it at what is essentially the driver level. Quote,
they could have tuned
right?
it. Yeah.
The input that is sent in from the sticks does not have to be. And honestly, maybe they did, and they just did a bad job of it. It's hard to know. And I don't know if you can do any tuning of the sticks at the hardware level. I don't honestly use my Switch very much, so I don't.
You probably can. They let you remap it. I actually thought about. So I did look up a guide for this game on the Switch specifically, and so it's. You can go in there and swap the sticks, and you can make it. So I might still try that to see, because you can make it really feel more like a twin stick or a dual stick shooter, or what am I trying to say? Anyway, dual analogs, but it messes up all the other games you're playing on the Switch. So
right, yeah,
but I wonder if there's
this game and then
sensitivity. Yeah, maybe there's sensitivity. But anyway.
Yeah, it feels like the curve is off, and it feels like a mess.
Yeah, I don't think they have. I mean, well, there must be aim acceleration in there, but it like you said, if they did tune it, it's just not. It just goes back to like, we can't underestimate, a game designed on one. Well, we hit it in our normal lives, right? Like Halo shipped on PC and on console, right? And whatever. It's like, and so those are completely different interfaces. And you have to treat each of them with respect. And it's not just a matter of, flipping a switch. They both have work.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we have the 3 C's these days is kind of the holy trinity of kind of the moment-to-moment feel of your game is camera, character, and controls, right? And definitely one of them here is, I mean, especially because the controls are so, in a first-person shooter game, are tied, all 3 of those are inextricably linked because the camera is the character, and the controls directly move it. So they're like as closely linked as those things can ever be. And, in this case, the impact of the controller, because I used to play games with that controller, at LucasArts, and as I was Mr. Rhythm on your Legend of Zelda cart, and I definitely remember how good that I thought that controller felt. So it definitely is noticeable.
Feels good with Zelda, right? Like it obviously feels amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I played Mario 64 that way too. Yeah,
I played on the Wii, I think, with the. Oh no, I played that. I played that on the Wii, I think. Maybe from the.
Maybe I did too.
I can't remember how I did it, but yeah, I mean, it definitely felt different, and a classic controller, and the GameCube for the other one, and for Zelda, and I suspect with the GameCube Zelda that they actually. I mean, they didn't just emulate that. There wasn't enough hardware distance for them to do that, so they had to actually go and do some tweaks. And usually they do, right? I mean, that's one of the things that they often do when they re-release things is that they actually spend the time, and a little teaser for our next game. They've done that. We won't talk about what it is yet, but that has happened, right? And so it'll be interesting to talk about that when we get there. Something to put a pin in for a few weeks from now. Let's talk about some of the other stuff that maybe on the more positive side, about the watch and the UI, in the level or in the game rather. And it's something you brought up that you thought was a little bit more interesting. And then maybe I can take you through the end of the game since you didn't get a chance to play that or to see the movie, so.
Yeah.
I know you want to know how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the dish, the whatever
satellite dish. Yeah.
We just hadn't mentioned it, and I don't know if it's a long topic, but I did want to call out ahead of my notes that one of the things I remember appreciating about this game in its era, and I think a lot of people did, especially on the platform that it was on, which wasn't always the case, that you'd expect it from Half-Life or Valve around this time or games like that, but they really leaned into the fantasy fulfillment of being Bond. Yes, Brett made good points about the awkwardness of it being a first person game when you make that a goal. However, the concept that they kind of they fictionalized in a diegetic way the interface, right? You have your watch. When you press the options, pause button or whatever, you see an anime. I mean, it's actually a little frustrating sometimes because it's so slow, but he pulls his watch up, you see a watch. It's very gadgety. It's very Bond. And then you are looking at your watch as you have a smartwatch today, but at the time watches didn't exist. And so you feel cool and you're like cycling through each of the screens, and yes, one of them is the options screen or whatever, but it still feels like you're in the watch. There's even like static that plays over the top of the UI every now and then to kind of root you in the fantasy fulfillment of the world that you're still
also maybe the best music in the game is on the watch, but
yeah, exactly. It's a fully immersive. The fact that they even changed the music, right? It's a fully immersive like moment where there's a willing suspension of disbelief moment of like, well, people technically are shooting at me while I'm doing this, but you're safe, of course. So that's a gamification thing that obviously everyone accepts. But then carrying that over to the HUD itself, like when you get hit, there's this concept of health and shields on around the edges of the screen, right? Which does that ring a bell for any other games? But yeah. And so it's like full screen. It's like on the screen, and from a HUD and UI perspective, the design.
And also, it's slightly circular, so it kind of reflects the watch.
Exactly. Yeah. And there, I should probably bring up some examples, but I can't think of them as usual off the top of my head right now. But that concept of having the full screen, actually Deus Ex maybe is one. There's that's concept of having, might have been the sequel, the second Deus Ex, but the concept of having, this full screen on screen indication of your health if you think about the N64 and Nintendo aesthetics and like being very in your face about critical information, not hiding it, etc. Like, I do think GoldenEye had an influence on lots of games after this because it was so, integrated into the experience. Something as simple as they could have just put bars on the screen, right? Like everybody else, but they chose to make it full screen, and it ticks down, right? And you see the color change as you're losing both of them, et cetera, and like you said, it kind of mirrors the watch aesthetic at the same time. So I just always applauded them at thinking of it in a holistic manner, because I love that stuff. But I do think that whether any of the games after it that tried to, we'll talk about one later, another game soon. But even though it was a pretty, in some ways, traditional HUD, like we talked about with Halo, there was a sense of it was your helmet, right? It was your helmet, your helmet's HUD.
Right.
And so,
we did. And Republic Commando as well.
Yeah, exactly. And we took it even further. So, yeah. So anyway, that was just a tidbit that I don't think we hadn't talked about too much.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that, and this is something we didn't talk about pre-show, is that it's kind of interesting how the levels sort of change at this point, I feel. These levels that we've played that kind of lead up to the train is kind of the turning point, I think, where the couple levels before this are very they're both rectilinear in a sense, but at the same time maze-like, in that it's not really clear where you're going. The train yards, it was a long time before I realized you could open the sliding doors. And at a certain point, I actually found the train, and I went up to it and tried to hit the door and open it, and the door didn't open. And I was like, well, I guess maybe I have to go around to the other side, because there weren't any obvious doors. Thing. Yeah. And it was just that I wasn't close enough, which was like, are you kidding me? But that's okay. That's fine. That's whatever it is. But I misread it. But that whole area and the level couple before that even the tank driving level are kind of like, you're in this space. It's not really clear where you're supposed to go.
And there's a lot of similarities, right? Like everything looks the same.
So exactly. Everything looks the same. In the building you're being interrogated, I must have walked past the door behind which Natalia was a dozen times. Like I kept walking. I had killed everybody. So I was just walking around the space constantly, just trying to find something new. I found like a secret room at one point. I was like, oh, that's cool. Wasn't really looking for that. I'd really much rather find her so I can
that whole level was very confusing. Yeah, everything just looked too similar.
Yeah, I mean that's a technical limitation of the platform and of the cart, right? Especially we talked about last time. I did check. Notepad is not quite as bloated as I might have indicated, but there are plenty of examples. Like for example, the thing that runs your taskbar. Oh man, that is an expensive operation on your PC. Look it up sometime. Takes up plenty of memory, so way more than this game did. And that's just to show the things that you can run. But anyway, don't get me started about bloated OSs. So it's a real shift, because as you get to the end of the game, they're clearly like, where you're going now, just go there. The train is an obvious example. You're in a tube, right? So you're just going directly, there's only one direction to go. Although at one point, I will say I went into a car and there was a brake like on the back half of the car instead of the front half of the car.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, I must have missed some. And so I turned around and went back to the beginning of the level and there weren't any. So that was also a weird choice, but that's okay. Whatever. After this, it's pretty much linear, not entirely. There are some sort of little sub loops that you can do as you go through these different bases, and then at the end you're on that dish, and finally having the final shootout with Trevelyan, the bad guy, and the Sean Bean character. Spoilers. And it's more or less what the movie is, right? I mean, they're fighting up there, and he, instead of in the game, he shoots a computer to make the dish stop aligning, and then you just got to go kill the bad guy, and then in the movie, he basically like jams up the gears. So it's a more physical, visceral, like here's a huge cog, sort of thing. Sort of similar to the end of the most recent Bond movie, where he's got like these big, levers to throw to make the doors open so that they can, destroy the plant and everything. It has that kind of feel, very analog, old technology that he's dealing with in this dish as well, which you can kind of imagine. Like to turn something that big, you need like these big gears, right? So he jams the gears. Great. And here it's more a computer, and that just kind of makes sense with like, well, what do we have? Let's reuse this asset that we've been able to destroy elsewhere. In the meantime, there is a section where you have to, protect the damsel while she hacks the computer, which I don't mind, because she's actually doing something. She's doing something only she can do, and you can't. It's also funny because she won't do that so Boris, who is the Alan Cumming character in the movie, he's there, and when you approach him, he pulls a gun on you. So of course what I did was shoot him. He pulled a gun on me. But that's not what the game wants you to do. It's funny, the game, you can't complete that mission if you kill him. You have to go. There's
a few of those where you're like, I'm not sure what I'm. Should I? Yeah.
So you just need to get up to him, and if you get up to him, Otto takes his gun, and he cowers, and then as soon as you turn your back, he yells out that he's invincible, which is what he says in the movie, and he runs off. If you kill him, you go to her. You finally find your way to let her into where you are, and And she says, you didn't have to kill him. He was just a programmer, or something like that. So I could definitely feel the engineers who worked on the game being part of that decision. Anyway,
it's interesting that how much they were trying to reflect the movie, like how you make those decisions on when to make it a good game and when to make it accurate to the movie. That's like an age-old challenge for these games. Yeah. I will say that now that you've run through sort of like the ending, a point that maybe we made already, but I want to reinforce it. Like I don't think I definitely didn't finish this game back in the day, but I played enough of the campaign to get it. But I didn't remember this. But playing this time, even though I didn't finish, I definitely applaud them on the fantasy fulfillment of secret agent levels that I want to be in. Like they kind of like they had a list and they obviously I guess that relates to the movie, but so it's kind of already there. But there's the train level, there's the the depot level, there's the
the spooky park that's in a city.
Oh my god, yeah, Statue Park, which is a real real famous spy place and real place in real life. There's the snow level, there's the missile silo where I have to blow up missiles. It's like all the things you want to do as a James Bond character. Like it's just one after another. And so I'm trying to put myself back in the time of, a kid playing this game back then, or a teenager or whatever, like, these are the things I want to do. And then ending in the dish and stuff is like even better. So, it's like, as far as like hitting a home run on that fantasy fulfillment side for this platform in this time, pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think the dish actually plays pretty well too, in that you're sort of chasing him and he's saying things to you. It's a very like the villain's castigating you for your beliefs. As you're about to gun him down, and it ties back to the beginning. I mean, it's just. It's just it does all of that quite well, I think, and it pays off pretty well because, of course, you've seen that guy several times as well through the course of the game. I think the last time you've seen him before that is on the train, but that you're going after him, and he basically dies in a similar way to the film in that he falls off that dish, and in the movie, the dish then, because of the jamming of the mechanisms, it messes the whole thing up and it crashes down somehow. I don't remember exactly. Maybe the helicopter had something to do with that. But anyway, there's other stuff. But they basically pay off on that part of the fantasy as well. So I think it is all pretty well done. And you're doing like a jungle infiltration, and it's hard to see the guys because they're in camo. And I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. And she's shooting with you at that point. She's gotten some quick training from Jack Wade or whoever is the CIA contact in that movie, and it all sort of works.
That's a real dish too, right? There's a big dish in. Where is it? What country is it?
This takes place in Cuba, and I don't think that this was a real dish.
I don't think the dish is in Cuba. I think
they filmed it on a real dish, yes. But in the movie, the dish is like submerged under a lake because, of course, and then they open and the lake just drains away, and they put up the big dish, and that's why the CIA couldn't find it to just bomb it. That's why Bond has to go. So it's a whole thing, but. And there are objectives tied to that you have to destroy. Well, in the simple version, like the lowest level of difficulty, you don't actually have to destroy the drain things or whatever. There's something having to do with water control that you're supposed to do in higher levels of difficulty that we didn't have to do. I didn't have to do. Although I think I did it anyway. I think I found them. I was like, well, I've got these mines. I might as well blow them up. But it doesn't reward you for that. Anyway.
That's scalability for those. We talked about that in pre-show too, but just to mention it a little bit there, that it's nice that they spent the time to scale the objective based on difficulty. Usually it's just, statistics and mechanical things, but if you're playing on the lower difficulty and you want to do them, they're there, but you don't lose if you don't do them. I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I wonder. I was going to say, I wonder if that was just something in the air, because I know Jedi Knight also does that. In fact, I remember famously, because this was back in a time when I would play games on the hardest difficulty. I was playing Jedi Knight, and there's that level where the ship is crashing, and you have to 0G navigate your way through. And I was playing that, and I found it impossible to do in the time that was allotted. And I asked somebody in test, what's the deal with this? It's such a luxury to be a game developer sometimes. If you're playing the studio's game, it was the same for me playing Fallout 3 when I was in the studio. I just called a lead tester like, hey, I can't find the 15th bobblehead. And he said, I think it's in such and such. In this case, it was, I'm in this crashing ship. I'm like, wow, this is really, really hard. How do you do it this fast? And the tester told me, well, we just took the fastest time a tester could do it and subtracted 5 seconds. So it's like, so nobody in the building could do that, right? When that game shipped at that difficulty level, we would not do that today. Let's just say I was very surprised by that. But yeah, that's another game that I can think of from the time. Also,
it was a thing. I think you're right. It was the age of how do we make difficulty levels more interesting than just easy, medium, and hard, right? Yeah, like and we were trying to I think everyone was trying to figure out trailblaze that. I think I could be wrong on this, but we had the level designer of that level on the podcast, Matt Tadaishi. I believe that was
did Tadaishi doing the falling ship? We might have even talked about it, but
pretty sure. So
it wasn't his fault that the time was set to be so short on the hardest level of difficulty. That was, I believe, a recommendation from Test. Well, yeah, he could have argued the other way. If we have him on again sometime, I'll have to take him to task. I'm not sure if there's anything else to mention. I guess one of the other things was, at the end of the game, it's all kind of just murder running. You're running through the levels and you're just pretty much free to murder everybody. One of those, there's also scientists that you're not supposed to kill. And when you're in doing this thing where you're making it so the lake can't cover up the thing again, there's a couple scientists in there and you're not supposed to kill them, which is fine, but there's just a lot more guys that you're mowing down. And again, because the games are the levels are more straight linear at that point for the most part, it's kind of giving you that satisfying, like, we know where you're headed and you can just kill everybody in your way going there. And it is kind of, even though there are these difficulty spikes, especially on the train, it is satisfying from the standpoint of like, no, now I'm just really good at this game and I know where I'm going. And you kind of get into the flow state of play of just, I know what I'm doing. I'm up to the task and I'm just going to mow through all these villains. They're all bad guys. You can tell they're dressed in black, and you go, and so there is sort of a satisfying conclusion in that sense of just, paying off on like, okay, I'm, now for the big payoff, I'm going to feel triumphant, and then I'm just going to murder, my way to the end. So it works pretty well from that standpoint, from an emotional kind of arc. I think,
and then you get movie credits.
And then you get the movie credits where you see every character in the game. They basically play and put camera in different places to as they all pose with guns. So like literally every character, every 3D model in the game, they show and they say their character names, not like voice actors or anything like that, because there's no voice. They just say, James Bond is 007 and Natalia whatever as the scientist or the hacker or whatever.
They didn't, because they use face scans and they didn't even mention whose face it was, which
they don't mention.
Illegal, but...
Yeah, they don't mention any of that stuff. I mean, it's whatever those folks are willing to sign. These days we wouldn't do that. I think back then nobody thought there was any.
I think there was a controversy about that later. Yeah.
Yeah, that may be true. That may be true.
That was the case.
Yeah. No, there is no credit given in the game that I saw to any humans who are who are shown.
In fact, it might be GoldenEye's fault that is actually
a thing we have to do.
Yeah. Not fault. But I mean, it's a good thing. You want to give them credit, but I think. I'm wondering.
They may be the ones who did that.
They're like, wait a second. Their unions exist.
Used our likeness, and that's possible. That's very possible. I mean, crediting standards, of course, were very different in video games versus films or whatever. As famously going back to Adventure, as we talked about when we talked about Adventure on the Atari, but our respect for the crediting standards of other industries probably wasn't there because we probably didn't know or didn't think about it, what it meant. And of course, in the past, 10 years, 15 years or whatever, we've had the whole negotiations with voice actors and everything because, of course, they work differently and they have unions. Anyway, kind of a separate question, but yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that part of the game because I could just kind of I could see where it was going. There's kind of a bunch of fodder in the way, and then I got to kill the main bad guy. So it worked pretty well. So it's what you want from the end of a Bond experience.
Sounds like it. Yeah, sounds like it was. That's great. And I mean, again, transporting ourselves back to that time, pretty impressive. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and they have little loops where you go one direction and you're getting the drop on some guys because they're faced the other direction, which is nice too. You feel like even though it's not a stealth game, you still feel stealthy because you came up behind these folks, and it's sort of plays either way you go. If you go this way, then those guys you come up behind, and in the other direction you come up on the front of, but you have other guys you can come up behind. So it's actually pretty well designed in places for that as well. So I think they were being thoughtful about or it seems like they were being thoughtful about what experience they wanted the player to have and making sure the player got to have that experience, which is I always appreciate. So, all right. I think that's about all we're going to say about the single player game, because we are going to try to play some multiplayer over the next week. We've got some scheduling challenges, but we're going to throw out some thoughts in the Discord. Tim had the bright idea of, I didn't say that sarcastically, even though I know your tendency is to interpret me that way. Tim had the thought, let's say, to have have some folks join us to play multiplayer if we can figure that out. So you might see that happening. Tim and I at least will try to do so. I don't know if we can manage to stream that or anything like that. I am traveling and I don't have a device to.
I don't know how to stream on the Switch. That's
okay.
I barely figured out the PC.
Oh yeah, you're doing it on PC, so you don't have a game card of any kind. So yeah, that won't happen.
Streaming wise, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, we won't be able to stream it, but we'll play because we want to play a little bit of the multiplayer because this was a hot multiplayer game. In fact, we have at least one email about that we'll read after we've played the multiplayer experience. That's more about the split screen experience. We won't be able to do that, of course, but the Switch version does support multiplayer. I don't know how, but they do. So I'd like to try that out. That'll be kind of interesting.
I think it's ironic too that we didn't play multiplayer for Halo.
It is.
Thinking about it,
we probably should have, huh?
We should have. That was a missed opportunity. Maybe we'll do a retro something someday.
Yeah, figure out something at some point when we go and play Halo 2, and you can tell me about the plant.
Nope.
Not going to happen. Let's turn instead then to some email. We'll probably keep it on the short side this week, but we do have some emails, so let's go ahead and turn to those sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You, sir, have, as usual, the first one, continuing on our ongoing retrospective of our episodes from Calling the Shots.
Nice. Yes. All right. This is a good one. I think about this game a lot. I don't know why, but so Calling the Shots, James Tiberius Togus, 190 to 193 Shenmue. Tim, you are my spirit animal. I've only played this game once through, and it was the year it came out on Dreamcast with two other friends. We would take turns on each day and train up for favorite moments, play mini games, and progress through the story. We always laughed so hard at the forklift section, where if you run into another forklift, they would simply back up and despawn. In a world where everything seems so immersive, this design choice stuck out so much and we imagine the forklift driver being erased from existence just by bumping into our protagonist. Back to the Tim Spirit Animal thing. I remember my friends poking fun at me for using my training time on the Move big wheel. My training time on the Move big wheel.
I'm sorry. I did not edit this, so I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
It's not quite working.
My training time on the Move big wheel. Okay. It was really easy, powerful, and maxed out quickly.
Oh, big wheel is like a move that he.
Oh, that's the Move, right? My training time on the Move big wheel. Right. And as someone who liked to focus on the basics, it was perfect fit. I was out on my walk with my infant in the stroller and burst out laughing when Tim summarized his strats for beating the final round of combat with Big Wheel. Thanks for the vindication! Exclamation point! Amazing, Colin. So his question at the end here: what is a build or approach you've used in a game that was seemingly unconventional but really paid off when it came to fruition? Yeah, that's a good question, but
that is. I was going to say that's a tough one for me to come up with for sure. I don't know that I normally think that way. I mean, as we talk about on the cast, I try to play whatever's the kind of new thing, which that's unique to this game. For example, if you were playing an Indiana Jones game, it would be the whip, right? Or what have you. And so I tend to try to focus on the thing that the developer's doing that's new. So for a game that you worked on, the new Tomb Raider series, like the bow, I did the bow exclusively. Yeah. I don't think I ever touched a gun in that. I used what else? I can't even think. Because any game where you can sort of level up lots of different things, but you can level them all up, basically in a Ubisoft game, I just do them all, right? And so it's like whatever works. So it's hard for me to pick a thing that I can think of that is like I kept doing this one thing and it really paid off. I feel like there probably have been JRPGs where I happen to luck into a good build. Like I put a ton of time, now that I think about it, in Dark Cloud 2 into leveling up some of the weapons, which meant, when I got to the latter part of the game, because I actually really liked the mechanic. I was just enjoying the play, and I wanted to see, because each weapon had basically a tree that you could evolve these games and these weapons into. So I have all these crazy difficult to get weapons, and then you could just walk through the end of the game because you had all the best stuff. So that was a thing where I did it purely because I was enjoying the mechanic of go find the stuff. I think there was some separate parts of the levels that you could go where the enemies were more difficult or something to make this more easy to do. But the weapons also had they could also break if you push them too far, if you use them too much without having them repaired. And I remember I was trying to get something up to its final form, and I broke it near, after hours, tens of hours probably of leveling this weapon up. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go finish the game now. I'm done. I'm done leveling up the weapons. But it did pay off because I had all these weapons that were super good. So that's a thing I can remember doing once. I'm pretty sure I was between jobs at the time, so that maybe explains it.
That is often your answer.
I'd like to take my retirement in stages. I'm like Travis McGee that way.
Yeah, I have two. I'm laughing because you're gonna punch me for this one or for one of these, but yeah, two pretty obvious ones that I actually did on stream.
Oh yeah, of course.
You might know. Hey, everybody! You might know that I finished Dark Souls with the starting weapon.
If I took a drink for every time I say
this, and it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't really fully planned out. It kind of just happened upon it, or happened into it. It wasn't like, I'm going to do it this way. I don't know. Yeah. I just wanted to see if it was possible. And then at one point I had to commit once I started streaming, because I didn't stream the whole thing, streamed about halfway through. So that one is the obvious funny one that is very specific to podcast listeners and people who watch the stream. But the other one is came to fruition. I don't think is really maybe the right way to put it, but I think it was unconventional. Playing Death Stranding without only walking. running the whole time, I'm also like, it's not that the game was better or easier because I did it. It was obviously not. But I will say what I got from the game by doing it that way was sort of amazing, right? Because I was like, I'm going to play this game like a hiker, so every mile, I felt like every mile walked was earned, And when you had to go around some crazy mountain or something, and you couldn't use a vehicle, it meant that much more. I mean, obviously not that exciting to stream probably, but
let's keep in mind this was during the pandemic when you weren't able to do your Pacific Crest hike. So
yeah, that's true. There's probably some subconscious psychology going on there too.
The other thing I was going to mention was that you were given a moniker, I should say, at LucasArts, probably in the tester pit, where you were Longo Two Guns. If I'm not mistaken. So you also have that to your name.
Yeah, that was from Bounty Hunter. Is where they came up with that, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember where that came from, but back in the day, you were known for. Did you play Outlaws that way, like with the?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, because I know they were different. Like Pinecone played only with the knife. He played the. The chief in that game and stuff.
Yeah, he would crouch with a knife. That's the only way he played, and he would just run around and stab people in the shins.
Yeah,
and he'd do pretty well. Actually,
he did pretty well. I remember that being like everybody had their strategy. That was a great game that had sort of asynchronous or asymmetric multiplayer. That each character played a little differently. All right, let me take the second email here. We're off topic a little bit. Subject, GoldenEye's interesting difficulty options from Troy, which is going to touch on a topic we already did. Hey, folks, I wouldn't be surprised if you got a slew of emails on this topic, but the listener question of difficulty versus accessibility popping up on the first episode of GoldenEye was fortuitous, since the game handles difficulty in a really interesting way. Each of the game's three default difficulty settings adjust a lot of the values you'd expect, like enemy accuracy, player resilience, available ammunition, etc. The secret sauce, and the reason I'd encourage you to at least check out the hardest difficulty level, is that each bump in difficulty also comes with additional objectives required to complete each level. Remember how cool it was to find the area under the dam in the first level? Well, on the harder difficulty levels, exploring that section is required in order to access a specific computer. And in fact, side note, I remember there is an uploader or downloader or some gadget or something that you're supposed to use that's in your inventory that we didn't need to use, but you're still given it. It's kind of funny. Like I said, the mission objectives or the objectives change, but the mission briefings don't.
The briefings talk about it. So it sounds like it's important. But every time I would start the level, I would go in to see what they really wanted me to do by going into the interface. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's see. The additional objectives really do change the feel of some levels, but it's kind of a shame that you have to deal with crack shot, aggressive, and frustratingly bullet spongy enemies in order to play with them turned on. Or at least until you unlock the 007 difficulty, which I've just learned in checking my facts for this email, allows you to play with 00 objectives and super easy to eliminate enemies. Thanks for the fun show and all of your fantastic insights, Troy.
That's cool.
So, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's what you want. Like, you want to feel like Bond, like you can do all the things. Like, that's what I appreciated about playing the easy difficulties. Like, I kind of feel more like Bond. He can shoot. Yeah.
There's been a new trend for a while. I think Ubisoft does this. You might need to correct me on that. And Crystal did this in some cases too, I believe. But to his point on the 007 difficulty, like not difficulty levels in a linear way, but difficulty, and I guess Celeste might be another example. Difficulty levels in a grid or modular way where you're basically like turning on mutators a la Skulls and Halo. Where you kind of like a la carte it, right? It's like, I want really hard enemies and I want really easy objectives, or I want, this many objectives and really easy. I feel like games starting to do that a little bit more over the past, 10 years or so, which
Tomb
is
Raider
like,
did it.
That's what that's why I couldn't remember. I was like, I feel like that.
Yeah, Tomb Raider definitely did it. You had more difficult puzzles versus combat. You had basically multiple axes. Yeah. Exploration might have been the third one, and you could kind of like choose which one you did. I will point out that the very first game we played for this cast was System Shock 2, which allowed you to do that. You could have more difficult puzzles and more difficult combat.
Yeah, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, it has. But here, I think those mutators are more common in the multiplayer at the time. And I think this game in particular kicked that off to make you be able to customize your matches quite a bit, which hopefully is something we'll talk about next week. But I think that kind of thinking was in, in the both in the air, but also just kind of the ethos of this team in particular. One of the things we didn't entirely touch on, just sort of glanced and talked around it this time, was like this game is sort of a mix of the sort of arcade console tradition, I guess I would say. A lot of the early games from Rare kind of have that feel of being more arcadey, and this is kind of has a mix of both like trying to do this movie experience, but also have this kind of arcadey feel, especially on this easier difficulty level, and it sounds like maybe also on the 007 difficulty where you get to mow things down but do all the objectives, which is a cool mix. So
yeah, the shooting gallery nature of it often, even back then, reminded me of like shooting gallery arcade games like Silent Scope, or what are those, some of those ones where you actually came with a gun that you're shooting, but it was like very like pop out and some of the more linear levels at least. But
yeah, for sure. Dino Crisis, that sort of thing, right? Yeah. All right, I think we'll call it there as far as emails go. We have more, and we even have some more for next week, but it's getting hot under this blanket, and so I'm gonna call it.
I forgot to mention that. Brett sounds much better because he's under a blanket.
If that actually works, we'll see.
It sounds better to me.
Okay, if not, I did all the sweating for nothing. But I thought I would give it a try. So sorry for last week, because when I produced it, I was like, oh man, I don't even know what to do. I'm not good enough with audio to know what to do. I was like, oh, this is really echoey. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for those emails. We'll get to more next week. As I pointed out, those were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. You can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
And someday he's going to Twitch again at the same link, same location. Maybe you'll be able to find him more commonly there. He says that if I go back and play some more Kingdom Hearts, that he'll commit. So we'll see how that goes once I'm back in the States. We also have a Discord. I'm going to put that in the show notes this week. Since I'm listening to this in production, this is your chance, Brett, to go put that link in there. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, our merch store, and the setting up and some of the administration of that Discord is by Mark Garcia. Have fun filming in Nintendo Vision this week, and good night.
Good night.